Fantasy lovers, romantasy addicts, and bookish souls, welcome. If you love enemies to lovers, morally great characters, fated destinies, subscribe. Let's get connected. You asked the questions, now I'm going to answer them as an indie author.
Your book intertwines fate, prophecy, and personal agency. How did you balance Seraphina's destiny with her choices? Was it important that she still had control over her path, despite the prophecies?
My book, Oath of Embers, has a lot of complexity to it, not just in the world building and the plot, but also the characters and their development and their growth throughout. If you don't know already, if you haven't read Oath of Embers, Seraphina is my main female character. It is a Viking-inspired new adult romantasy, full of tropes that we love, like enemies to lovers, found family, magical realism. I have some amphitheres, which also, if you don't know what an amphitheer is essentially a serpentine dragon, a micro trope of trials, and of course, all different kinds of epic fun and adventure that you'll find in a romantasy. So how did I balance her destiny with also wanting to have some choice in the matter? Well, she is essentially destined to be this great weapon that will determine who wins what side of the war in the realm that they are in. She is stolen away by this clan general of an evil clan called the Varangard, who kind of terrorizes and rules over the realm, while there are other entities and powers that may be in the realm. There is no one true reigning power, and so of course the powers that be in the realm are trying to fight for that one true rule and that one true reign, and her power and her abilities have been lost for a very long time, and so she's actually been kind of the weapon that they've been searching for a really long time. How that intertwines with kind of her destiny and her choices that she makes, she's obviously fighting against it throughout the story, and before she even really knows what's going on or why she's been chosen, she's essentially fighting back throughout the entire story, which is what I really loved about her as a character. I wanted to make sure she wasn't, a young being in the world who didn't have any particular set of skills or anything. Like, that's not her at all. She's grown up in a hardened village. Her father taught her to be a huntress, which is actually the male main character's nickname for her is Little Huntress. But she's fierce in her own right. She has a certain set of skills from the very beginning, but she obviously has a lot of growth throughout the book. So it's a balance between what was fated for her and what she decides is going to be her fate. It's an overarching theme throughout the entire book. But I do think it was really important for her to feel like she had some kind of control over her life and her path, despite the prophecies that are saying certain things about her. She's going to have her own interpretation of it as we move through the series. And as you get to the end of book one, there's lots of plot twists, lots of turns that at least the readers who have read it so far have told me that they did not see coming, or maybe had a suspicion but weren't 100% sure if it was going to happen or not. So by the time you get to the end of book one, you're in this state of turmoil trying to figure out exactly what she's going to do next. And that's really where I wanted the story to begin for the Eternal Earth series.
The world feels rich and lived in. Did you build the lore first and fit the characters into it? Or did Seraphina's journey shape the world around her?
Yeah, so Seraphina's journey, it shaped some of the world around her. I knew from the very beginning I wanted it to be a Viking-inspired realm stuck in perpetual winter. And there's some lore kind of around why it's always cold and snowing in their lands and why they haven't seen. It's not that the sun doesn't exist. It's just that it's not a warm place to be. And most, bodies of water are frozen, things like that. But I also wanted it to be a rugged place. I felt between it being a cold, rugged realm, while with these battling powers trying to decide and figure out through some kind of war, impending war, essentially, who was going to reign as the true power in the realm. I wanted it to feel gritty and, very much full of uncertainty and unknowns from the very beginning. It wasn't going to be a world that you had seen time and time again, that you know exactly what's going to happen. I wanted to keep readers on the edge of their seats essentially as they're reading throughout the book. So it's not your typical romantasy where it's in this, fated fae realm or what have you, which we all know and love those stories. I just wanted mine to be something a little bit different and a little more rugged. So yeah, the lore was essentially there from the very beginning. The ruggedness, I knew I wanted it to be Viking inspired. All of that was kind of planned from the very beginning. But there are some things about the realm and how she travels through it and part of her journey that did come about as I was already writing. I think part of it was because of her strength in her character and her journey as she developed throughout the story started making me realize that I needed to travel further. I needed to do more. We needed to go throughout the realm and be in multiple settings, not just one, throughout the whole story.
The themes of deception and hidden motives run deep in your story. How do you approach writing characters who must play a double game?
That's an interesting question. So, deception, hidden motives, very much a part of Oath of Embers. Seraphina herself actually she struggles with trusting people, but she has extreme sense of loyalty. And once you are in her inner circle, essentially, there is no going back. She is going to fiercely care for you and fight for you through the end. And despite certain betrayals and secrecy that's going to happen throughout the story, while she may have a certain particularly not so pleasant reaction to some of those things, she is still fighting for what she believes in. She's still fighting for who she cares about, no matter what, even if she feels like she needs to take a step back or has some back and forth with some characters. There's some deception of herself as well, and her realizing that she can't be that person that she was trying to be to take down the evil clan that has essentially stolen her from her village. Throughout the story, she's trying to figure out a way to take them down from the inside out, since they're not letting her leave and they're trying to make her indoctrinated to become one of them. She's like, well, I'll just go along with this game and I'll pretend like I'm in it fully and then find out all their secrets and use it against them. But even through that part of her journey, she starts to feel like this is not who she is. This isn't who she wants to be. She can't go on with this deception herself, despite even those who may be deceiving her and some of the betrayals that she is going to go through throughout the story. She has a very fierce loyalty and love for those she cares about. And so it's almost a journey of like, despite all of these things that life and fate are throwing at her, she's working really hard to maintain the core of who she is and who she wants to be, despite what these prophecies and fate might be trying to manipulate her to be and do.
You write in deep POV, making Seraphina's emotions and inner turmoil incredibly raw. Why did you choose this perspective? And how does it enhance the reader's connection to her?
When I first started writing the story, I actually wrote it in first person point of view, about a third of the way through the book, before I just kept hitting roadblock after roadblock of how I really wanted to write the story and how I wanted the reader to be immersed. So I actually ended up going back and rewriting the parts of the book that I had written in third person omnipresent. So for those of you who may not know, third person omnipresent essentially means while your narrator is telling the story from kind of an outside perspective, they have insight into how all the characters are thinking and feeling, not just through what they're saying. So you kind of have a deeper immersion into the world and into what everyone is thinking and feeling in a way that you wouldn't if it was in first person point of view, which is very typical of Romantasy to have first person point of view. I just felt like in order for you to understand all of the complexities that were happening in Oath of Embers, it needed to be in third person point of view. And I think that helps the reader stay connected to her because their understanding of the trauma that she went through, her current life circumstances, and then of course her end goal of just independence and control over her own life. And I think it helps you better understand and be in it with her when certain things are going wrong in her life or certain plot twists are happening, and you're just as in it as much as you possibly could be, because you know not just her thoughts and feelings about the situation, but everyone else's as well.
Kalen is mysterious and powerful, and his dynamic with Seraphina is laced with tension. How do you craft compelling character chemistry without rushing the romance?
I would say it's kind of difficult. but it's also a challenge that is exciting when it comes to writing and being an author. Kalen, if you don't know, he is a male main character in my story. And yes, he's strong, he's powerful. He is a shadow daddy, he has shadow powers. He can use them to manipulate things, they can be sentient, he can move through them. They can also help him kind of move through different magical barriers or enchantments. There's a lot of different functions and mysteries around him and his power and what exactly that means for him. But not just that, but also his position in the clan. He is the clan general for the most evil clan in the realm. And so he's essentially the most ruthless of them that you could find. And she is taken and stolen by him. So I think part of crafting that compelling character tension and that, true enemies to lovers journey is, well, one, they are certainly on the verge of killing each other throughout the beginning of the book um, and through parts of the middle, as well as some in the end. It kind of never really goes away, this underlying tension between like wanting to loathe one another and then falling for each other. There's an initial attraction there, obviously, but without actually knowing each other truly, it's just an infatuation more than anything else in the beginning. So you kind of have to give it that development of teasing with, yes, there's an attraction, but they're both against it. And, there's this teasing, and then there's some sarcasm, and there's this delicious banter that kind of helps you grow from the beginning, where they're just on the verge of wanting to just erase each other from the realm, from existence, to having this more meaningful and in-depth relationship with each other that just transcends all of that from the very beginning. So it's challenging, but I love it. And I think you'll find that Seraphina and Kaylin have very much a long journey ahead of them.
Your prose is lush and immersive, often blending poetic descriptions with action-driven pacing. How do you strike that balance between beautiful writing and keeping the tension high?
I would say when I was writing this book, my whole perspective from the very beginning was I was writing a book that I wanted to read. When I first started writing this, I had zero intention of publishing it. I just wanted to write what I thought was actually going to be a short story, by the way. There are 3 main female characters throughout the entire series. The first 3 books are essentially their origin stories before we get to book 4, where they all meet at the same crossroads in their realms and their time. So I was going to write 3 short stories at the very beginning to kind of give a little bit of background on each of these characters. But from the very beginning, when I started with Seraphina's story, she had a lot more to say. There was a lot more to her story that needed to be told before we could even continue. So as I was writing more and more, it was becoming a much thicker, much longer, much more fully developed book, novel, really. That's when I finally decided, why would I keep this for myself? I would love to share this with other people because it's a book that I know that I would love, and I can imagine there are others who would enjoy it as well. So I wrote descriptions that I felt were immersive. I didn't enjoy reading books that didn't have a true description of what was going on because I'm a very visual reader. I play it like a movie in my head, and it's really hard for me to do that when I don't feel the author put in full descriptions. And I try to balance that as well, though, with not being overly descriptive, because you can go down a rabbit hole with like 3 paragraphs just describing a room. And while there is a place and time for that, I wanted to keep it as immersive, descriptive, but also continuing the story as I possibly could. So it's a very fast-paced book. She travels throughout the realm. It's not just in one setting, but I tried very much to make it clear, here's what she's wearing, here's what she's doing, here's the environment that she's in, here's what everyone else looks like, here's what they did with their hair and their makeup and their clothes, and it's just a few extra sentences essentially per paragraph as you're writing the story. But I intentionally did that because I wanted people who either loved seeing it play out in a movie or really had no ability to kind of read that way at all to still be very clear on exactly what I was envisioning the story to be. So that's why there's so much description and immersion, and why it seems poetic at times, because I really wanted to make sure that this was a well thought out matured story, and it wasn't just meant to be read on like, a second grade reading level. This was meant to be educational and immersive while still giving you the quick hits and adventure of a romantasy.
Serafina starts out as a survivor with deep wounds, and her journey is one of resilience and power. How did you develop her internal struggles, and what was the hardest part about writing her transformation?
Serafina definitely has a traumatic past, and it does hinder her in a lot of the things that she tries to do throughout the story. It is part of her growth, it's part of her character development, and I think it's also part of what helps readers connect to her and makes her more relatable, because in real life, there is a lot of high anxiety and pressure and feeling a lack of control and things kind of spiraling out. And I wanted to put as much of myself into the character and into the story as I possibly could as well. So there's a lot of actions and reactions that Serafina has as if you were actually in that world. And I wanted it to feel that way. We read to escape sometimes and to disassociate. And so I wanted it to be a world that felt like they could really see themselves in it as a reader. So yes, her journey is intense, and I think she has a lot of internal struggles as well as some external ones that she has to go through. But I wouldn't even really say it was challenging to write those parts of the story. I would say more that they were the easiest parts to write in the story, because it really came from a place that's like inside my own heart and my own soul that I put into the story and I put into the characters, because I wanted a piece of myself to go with it. And so actually it was the easier part for me to do is having that development in her character from the very beginning through the end, but also thinking of myself as like, if I had these powers and I had these other stressors and these other unknowns in my life, how would I navigate that if I were her? And so that's just how I wrote the story.
Enemies to lovers is a central theme in Oath of Embers, but it's more than just banter and tension. It's built on layered emotions and conflicting loyalties. How do you ensure the romance feels organic and not forced?
Enemies to lovers is a central theme. And I honestly, that's what I love reading the most, and definitely what I love writing the most. There are a lot of layers when it comes to their stories and the trauma that they go through together and individually. And it kind of goes back to the last question, I guess, with my answer, with how I wanted it to feel as relatable as possible. And so any reaction or action that the characters take, I wrote based on what I felt like would actually happen if this was a real world and if we really were in Earless and if this really was happening. So I didn't want to, I wanted to have a fantastical world that's fiction that you could find yourself in, but I also wanted it to be as relatable as possible. Like if you really were this character and you really were in this realm and these circumstances really were happening to you, how would you react? And I think that's what really makes the true enemies to lovers such an amazing trope, but also plays out so well in Oath of Embers, because the characters are reacting in a way that's believable. And I think that's really key when you write enemies to lovers.
Kalen commands shadows, which mirrors his own emotional depth. What inspired his abilities, and how do they tie into his character arc?
Well, I had to write a shadow daddy to begin with. Let's just start there with the most basic answer. When I was trying to figure out at the very beginning of the story who the male main character was going to be and what his abilities were, I was very much in my like romantasy era in the books that I was reading, and I was very much heavily inspired by that kind of character. But I also wanted it to I wanted to give my own twist on it. So you'll learn throughout the book kind of how he uses those powers and what makes them unique to him as a character in the story. But as far as like his emotional depth and kind of what he has been through, at first you want to hate him. You want him to be this evil villain that's like deceptively attractive, but also he's not her friend. Like he is not there to make sure that she succeeds in her endeavors. He very much wants to control her. And you start to learn throughout the book why he is the way that he is in the very beginning, and why he seems to also kind of hide some of her secrets from others who would use them against her. You start to learn piece by piece how he's actually been protecting her from the very beginning, and why he treated her the way that he did, and why he wanted to make sure that she didn't care for him and that she wouldn't want to be anywhere near him. There's a lot more secrets to unveil in the next book, so I don't want to give too much away and spoil anything, but just know that while his character seems very domineering and controlling and very much like cocky and sarcastic and doesn't really care about anything, you'll really start to find right at the end that's not true at all. That's just how he's been portraying himself, and that there's so many more layers to him.
The Celestial Axe of Wrath is a powerful artifact. Can you share the inspiration behind it and how its magic influences Seraphina's journey?
Yes, so as you can imagine, with it being a Viking-inspired romantasy, I had to include an axe, but it needed to be a unique axe. It needed to be almost not exactly like the Legend of Thor in his hammer, but on some level that way. It was kind of the inspiration behind the Celestial Axe of Wrath. It was, you'll find out later, wielded by her father and then her ancestors before him. And so it was actually passed down, and only their bloodline can wield the axe. And so it's not even, it's not like the main, it's not a huge main plot point in the very beginning of the first book, but as you go through the series, you'll start to understand a little bit more of its significance and why it is only tied to her bloodlines. But yeah, that was kind of the inspiration about it. It influences her story in a way that helps her understand who she was and how to be connected to the people who came before her and what her fate is. It also is the weapon that she will use to turn the tides of who is going to be the ultimate power in the realm, or if she decides that's what she even wants.
Magical realism threads through your world, blending the mystical with raw human struggles. How do you ensure the magic enhances the story rather than overshadows it?
I try to incorporate magic in a way that it wasn't necessarily the main driver behind what was being influenced in the plot and their story, but I wanted it to complement it in a way that people have a version of lesser magics, is what I call them. They can kind of move some things around, maybe turn on a few lights, floating drinks in a bar, those kinds of things, just like everyday use. But truly, magic has been lost in the realm, like true power. And so, one of the things you'll find out is the chieftain, the evil clan leader of the Varangard, is actually trying to collect those who have stronger power besides lesser magics. And that's what he thinks is going to be the way that he will take over the reigning rule in the realm as being the main power. And so you later find out how he's doing that, how he's collecting people and how he is manipulating them to see what kind of powers they may or may not have, what bloodlines may be dormant in them, and how to manipulate and use that. Because there are some trials that they go through. There are some secret potions being passed around that are kind of igniting abilities in people that they may not have realized that they had. And you start to understand as Seraphina unravels all of these mysteries behind the chieftain's motivations for what he's doing in the realm, why that's so important. And so I wanted it to be, again, a world that was still fantasy, but was as believable and as relatable as it could be.
The ending is just the beginning of something bigger. Without spoilers, what emotions do you want readers to feel as they turn the last page?
Oh, wow. What emotions do I want them to feel? I want them to feel enraged. I want them to feel empowered, and I want them to feel motivated to go after what they really want. So outside of Oath of Embers, I want it to be empowering, and I want it to be putting the reader in a position of power and of strength, and understanding that no matter what anyone tells you you can or can't do, you are the ultimate decider of your fate.
Your book isn't just a romantasy. It's about identity, power, and sacrifice. What's the core message or emotion you hope resonates most with readers?
Core message is I want readers to feel like that they can overcome anything, that despite their traumas, despite their past, despite maybe some hindrances they feel like they're going through in their mental health or their physical ability or their circumstances, you can create your own future. It's your decision. You can't blame anyone else for it either. And no matter what else is going on and whatever your circumstances are, you can fight for what you want and you can go after it and you can overcome any obstacles that come in your way, whether it's you being in your own head or outside circumstances. You can go after exactly what you want and still care about those that are important to you. And I want them to feel empowered to be able to do that.
Finally, what's next for Seraphina in the Eternal Oath series? Can you give us a hint of what's to come?
Yes. So as we finish up Oath of Embers and as you get to the climactic ending, you realize that she's entering a doorway to another realm. So that's not much of a spoiler. I do talk about that on my website and in a lot of my advertising for my book, because the first 3 books, again, are 3 different heroines who all end up in the same place in time. So they all end up in this path, this doorway between realms, because there are 3 known realms in this universe, and they are all coming to the same crossroads of they've got problems and things that they need to deal with in their own realm, but they can't do it alone and they need to find help. And there's just been this outside force that's been calling to them and giving them visions and telling them to come to this meeting place where they can find help and answers for all of the problems that they're having to deal with. So essentially, Seraphina is on this journey of self-discovery and trying to find a way to change her fate. Thanks for watching and for the interview questions that you were wanting to ask me about Oath of Embers and about writing and about Seraphina and my debut novel. I'm so excited to share this world with everyone. Book 2 will be coming out in March 2025, and then as well as the novella for Oath of Embers. And then I fully plan on having book 3 in the series publish this summer 2025. And then we'll continue the story either later 2025 or early 2026. So the first 3 books of the series will be published by mid 2025. And then we'll continue the story with a couple other novellas as well before we even get to book 4. So super excited to share the story with you guys. I wanted to write a new adult romantasy that was both empowering, enriching, and keeps you on your toes with all the plot twists and mysteries that abound throughout all of the stories and all of our female heroines that you will learn about. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, especially if you want to continue learning more about my writing process and about the journey that I will be taking you on in this series. And if you stayed on through the rest of this video, I thank you so much and happy reading.